Hey everybody, Keisha here, and today I am here with my friend
Jennifer Guskin,
and we need your help. We are right now working on advocacy for combating human trafficking, and here's why. So we'll give you a little bit of background of our story and why we're doing what we're doing.
I was adopted as an infant by a couple who sold me throughout my childhood. I have been to Epstein Island and on multiple Lolita Express types of flights as a child. After I went public, Child Protective Services opened a substance-exposed newborn case, even though all tests came back negative, and they told me that if I wouldn't stop posting on social media, I would never see my daughter again. I started to connect how I was adopted as an infant and then sold throughout my childhood, how many other children who have been through the adoption, foster, and CPS pipelines have also been trafficked to Epstein's Elk.
And as many of you guys know already, based on the work that we do at the CARES Project, I'm an American Indian born in Canada under the Jay Treaty. My father and I were exposed in the improper contagion mitigation for the COVID pandemic in early 2020. As a result of this, I lost everything: a house, cars, corporate assets, jobs. Bank accounts were shut down in Canada, and I fled to the US as an American Indian, fully documented, and was trafficked by rogue agents in ICE and other agents in the government, and forced to live with single American men. I was even imprisoned for 7 months initially, and then trafficked throughout the states. Put on full surveillance tracking and wasn't allowed to leave the city, house, or state without permission, or work without permission. And that happened for many years, and I was on and off the streets because of that, and in and out of shelters. And that is just a small example of what many go through in this trafficking system, be it the family courts or otherwise. So that's why the CARES Project will be going to DC to speak with representatives and do live reporting. We're also going to be in contact with other families who are dealing with human trafficking, and through the CPS courts or through any other means, lesser versions of trafficking, and doing reporting on them live and otherwise. We will also be working on, we ultimately want to shine light on what's going on with the trafficking here in the US. And we also want to meet with various agencies in DC, and we'll be going back and forth for training sessions and other things so that we can be better equipped to help people deal with resolving some of the issues that we're seeing. We will also be putting forth petitions in government to help people get justice, and that's something that we have been working on already so far. We have some petitions that have recently been filed in the state of Colorado, Michigan, Texas, and Arizona, and we will be continuing.
But we can't do this on our own. We will be traveling to events and training courses, as well as DC on a consistent basis. We also have to get acceptable equipment, such as computers, cameras, interview gear, etc. There will be other miscellaneous costs that would also be like gas, food, and rooms if necessary.
So that is why we are working towards combating human trafficking, and that is exactly why we need your help. We cannot do this alone, and most what the CARES Project does is on its own dime. And so we do love and appreciate each and every one of you that support us and all the work that we do. As many of you know, we also live stream on Lindell TV every day. And everything we do, like I said, is on our own dime. So we appreciate all the love and support and all the people who do donate. And we would very much love and appreciate that still. Thank you everybody for your time and considerations. And thank you for all the support. And we will catch you guys in the next one, and hopefully we might see you guys in the future and come across you and maybe be able to do some great things together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the CARES Project podcast. Today, again, we have with us returning guest, John Goodman, who's coming and brought some good information the last time about the 2020 election, and we're going to be talking about some government corruption. So I'll let you kind of reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thank you very much, Dale. It's great to be back. on the CARES project again when I was on a few weeks ago. Had a lot of people on X respond, and it was just the message was resonating. So when I had an opportunity to come back on again, I'm back here today. So again, my name's John Goodman. I'm a member of the Florida Election Integrity Committee. My focus is on mail-in ballots and the harm they cause and the fraudulent cause of affecting elections, and also on the weaponization of our judicial system, where it's getting more now that innocence or guilt is based on your last name more than the actual evidence that's in the court. So the bottom line is, as most of my followers know, I got involved in a bigger way in 2016 into politics when Hillary Clinton received the debate questions in advance, as you recall, from Donna Brazile from CNN, and that really bothered me. And then I saw the fake impeachments, and I saw them doing everything illegal to try to get Donald Trump out of office. And so I covered the 2020 election by putting my face all the way up to the screen for 19 or 20 hours straight with my camera. And I guess the bottom line is this: at 1:28 a.m., CNN declared Donald Trump the winner of Michigan, and they colored their big CNN map red, and it was great. And then an hour and a half later, it had been flipped back to clear, and I knew that there had been election fraud. And once we got the voter rolls and the pictures I took, it was obvious that there was election fraud in the state of Michigan. And finally, Steve Stern, who is a well-known Republican, very respected here in Florida, and really very good friends with President Trump and Steve Bannon and those kind of people that I don't know, but And he said, "Come on my show," after he looked at the pictures, and I did. I went on his show, and they got an outpouring like crazy, and I'm like, wow, So I started my own series on X that airs once a week. It's called John Goodman Comments, and we've done some good stuff. And some of the episodes, over 100,000 views, and they've really taken off. And that's not me being a braggadocious person. That's thanks to my followers who repost, who follow, who talk about the issues. My followers, without them, I'd be nowhere with getting these issues out into the public eye. So thank you to my followers. This is not a one-man show here. And then the following was so great, I ended up getting an invite to speak at Trump International, which I did earlier in March. And that was a big thrill for me. Again, I'm a private citizen. And then I was offered the post on the Florida Election Integrity Team, where I'm doing some good work right now. So that is my path. I do want to say quickly that I went to public high school, and I went to the University of Louisville, regular schooling. But when it came to political science, I have homeschooled myself. I was following politics as a teenager when my friends would be watching MTV and I'd be watching a political show. They thought that was weird. Maybe it was, but my interest has always been politics. So I'm homeschooled in politics on the side, despite going to public schools growing up. So that's how I got here today. And I'm looking forward to a robust discussion with Dale. We're going to have a great show because we're going to be not just talking, but we're going to be showing you pictures and videos and things to back up what we're showing you. And then at the end of the show, we're going to sort of make it a little fun because I'm going to share some footage I have not shared ever of President Trump. You're going to love it. And that's going to be a big thrill for a lot of you. So I'm glad to be back on the show, and I'll turn it back over to Dale. And I cannot hear Dale, but I see him talking, but I can't hear him.
I like to talk to myself a lot. I tell this to my daughter. I mean,
I told you I was working on lip reading, but I didn't think you were going to start it in the middle of the show. I thought we could do that on the side.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta get that one figured out. But this whole thing that we were talking about, like now we're looking at like the activities of Biden and his father Joe. I mean Joe and Hunter, father and son duo. We're going to kind of bring into that because we're talking about foreign interference and government corruption. And this is a picture that I'm going to bring up here. You can sit down and see, obviously, Hunter Biden there and Joe Biden. You see these two other men. So if you want to kind of take it away and tell us what we're seeing here so that the viewers can know.
Right. Starting in 2014, Joe and Hunter Biden started this pay for play scheme. And Joe Biden was vice president at the time. And basically, he was getting paid, the Biden family was getting paid in exchange for doing favors for foreign countries. And most of the favors had to do with trade restrictions and trade policies and taxes. But nevertheless, Joe Biden was making exceptions to policies of the United States in exchange for the Biden family being paid. The picture you just saw is Joe and Hunter with two Kazakhstan oligarchs. Kazakhstan is one of the countries that was really willing to pay big money to get more involved in the United States economy. A very small country. And they thought, well, if we can get our products sold in the United States on a good clip, then our whole country of Kazakhstan is going to be much better shape. So in order to get that done, they paid off Joe Biden to become part of the fold in making sure that Kazakhstan's products were all over the shelves and the trade restrictions were lowered down. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm surprised there's a picture of it because we all remember for several years, Joe Biden. I'm not involved in Hunter Biden's business. I don't know anything about Hunter Biden's business, but here we are. There he is with his son and the oligarchs making deals in this pay-for-play scheme.
Well, that's literally foreign interference coming from somewhere else, that they're going and they're giving out bribes to people so that they can get favors inside of the government. That is not the way things should be done. And that is some serious issues that need to be dealt with. And we're going to pull up another clip here because Biden gets pretty brazen himself when he's sitting down and he's dealing with these things. He's not hiding this. So let's listen to this clip and then we'll discuss.
And I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
That's brave.
Terrible.
That's
Terrible.
brave. That shouldn't be done.
So we'll elaborate on what that is. As part of a pay-for-play scheme, continuing of what we've been talking about, Ukraine, before they were invaded by Russia, back in 2014, 2015, in that neighborhood, their economy was on the rocks. It was in bad shape. So they wanted a lot of aid from the United States. And Joe Biden said, okay, you want some aid from the United States? We want you to put my son, Hunter Biden, on the board of directors of Burisma, which is a Ukrainian gas and energy company. And it pays $3 or $4 million a year job. But Hunter Biden never had any experience in gas or energy. But the Ukrainians needed the money. They needed aid. They needed a lot of things from the United States. So they put Hunter Biden on the board of directors. Shortly after that, Burisma became under investigation for money laundering. with Hunter Biden on the board of directors. So this is Joe Biden in 2018 after he's out of office. What we just saw.
Yes, but
Loading.
but he was talking about what he did during office. And
Right.
during the time that he was in office during the Obama years, didn't they have a change in government in the Ukraine?
They did have a change in government. And that video, even though it's 2018, he is, yes, describing what had happened several years earlier, where he told the Ukrainians who were investigating Burisma, Hunter Biden basically investigating, he told them, if you don't get that prosecutor off the case, Joe Biden's telling them, you just watched it, if you don't get that prosecutor off the case, you're not getting the aid. It was straight up blackmail. If you don't get the prosecutor fired, and he said, I'll be here 6 more hours. If that prosecutor's not fired, you don't get the aid. And then you think, well, Barack Obama must be on board with this, because if you watch the video, I think we should play it one more time after we're done. If you watch the video again, he says, I know I'm not the president. I told him, call the president. You still won't get the aid. So obviously Barack Obama knew that this was going on, or else why would he say call Obama, because you're still not getting the money. So this is definitely pay for play. This is definitely treasonous. And so, yeah, let's play it one more time, if you don't mind, Dale. And notice also at the very end when he says to them, and they did finally change prosecutors. They put in a prosecutor that was good at the time.
Yes.
Notice that he said at the time, at the very end.
Yes, let's run it. Yeah. Let's run it
again. Yeah.
I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
So let's just kind of, before we get to the next thing, because I'm going to pull something up here. Remember that Hunter Biden, he is with Metabiota and he was with Burisma. Metabiota, we know, was involved in a biological weapons scandal and all of these things. And this is out in the public record. There's enough documentation on this. So you're looking at Joe Biden openly talking about getting foreign interference to get his son into positions and get them to stop investigating, right? And he is engaging in foreign interference in the Ukraine, and this is the Ukraine that later gets invaded by Putin because of, lo and behold, biological weapons, which is things that his son was involved in.
This is exactly, and I don't use the word treason lightly, but this is treason. This is treason. 100%. To say, I rarely use the word. I think they use the word impeach too much. There's a lot of words maybe that I think are used too much, but this is a classic case of treason. And he just added insult to injury by saying, you're not getting the aid money unless you stop investigating Burisma. And the whole reason why Burisma was a big deal is because the pay for play, Ukraine's part of that, was to put Hunter Biden on the board to begin with. So, and then money laundering shortly after. Gee, what a surprise, right?
Yeah. Biden. And he showed us exactly what they do over here. But I want to bring something up over here from the U.S. that ties into what they're doing. So this is a document. This is from the government. What is it? Sorry. The U.S. Government Accountability Office. They send a letter there, and they were talking about the issues with for federal agencies providing funds to foreign entities such as universities and laboratories for research and other purposes. And then they also go ahead and say that countries like China have, like, there's a possibility of them exploiting this, and this could harm U.S. national security or economic competitiveness about the biological weapons. This is something that Hunter Biden was already involved in. And anybody who's seen my documentation, and I can tell you, go look on my X posts and stuff, I have this, but we'll be covering this more a little bit later in detail in future episodes because people need to see this again. But you're watching what is happening, and they're going into foreign interference, and this is biological weapons. U.S. agency said this could help hurt national security and the economic prosperity of the United States government, right? Like, so you're watching this play out in real time. This is absolutely disgusting what they're doing. And I'm gonna, sorry, go ahead. You wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, and explain to the viewers on how COVID was not an accident, because I think there's still millions of Americans out there that think this was an accidental leak that never intended to happen, that was a freak thing. But as we know now from documentation and your investigations and your connections and your sources, this was not just an accident of COVID-19. It goes much deeper than that.
Oh, yes. This is impossible that it's an accident. And we're going to start pulling up some slides here, and I'm going to, bear with me, we're going to get there because this is going to show this very clearly in your mind.
Very interesting stuff, Dale, that you've got. Very
Oh, yes. So you're looking at this right here, and you're seeing the NIH and the USAID getting in and funding things into different governmental agencies, just kind of stuff that we're talking about. You're seeing that there's Wuhan University, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the Academy of Military Medical Sciences. Remember these places, especially the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the Academy of Medical Sciences. And you're seeing that they're funding them through the EcoHealth Alliance, University of California, Duke University, another campus of University of California. And then you see the USAID, which was being audited by DOGE, that was funding the EcoHealth Alliance, where Peter Daszak and so forth were putting together biological weapons. So now we look at this, and we're going to start looking at a couple other things, because it wasn't just coming from the United States. It was coming from all portions. So we had people here in Canada, and we're going to look at this here, and then we'll pull up the video clip for it after. But right here, we have the Canadian lab. There were some scientists that were there that were escorted out of the Winnipeg Biolab in 2019. And they had sent over Henipa virus over to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And we actually have documentation. Let me pull this up here. That shows you that the Henipa virus actually was found in patients inside of that were found in patients. And here we have the document here. Just give me a second to get this up, and we will show this to you so you can see it for yourself, that you can understand that this is a serious issue, because you don't get to these things by accident and so forth. So I'm going to just get this up. Actually, I'll just put it here. Let's see this here.
It was a...
Right. There we go. There's the study right there. So I want you guys to go back and look at that, and you can see all of the different, and then you see the woman there from the scientist. Her name is Qiu, who was connected to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which you can see right there. You can also see that, yes, that they were also saying in their own documentation that they were tied to the mRNA vaccine and all of these different things that you can see right there. enter this in the public record in the Canadian information. So, yes, you're going to say something? Sorry, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, you look at the timing of COVID, and when did it hit the United States? About March the 10th, 2020. Right about the same exact time is when the presidential candidates start doing heavy campaigning, heavy rallies, the last 5 to 6 months before the election. The timing is not coincidental at all, because the overall goal was to disrupt the election. The overall goal was to make sure that there was going to be vote through a mailing format where Joe Biden was going to win. And this election was decided before Election Day, well before Election Day. So, Dale, yeah, it really, it's very scary. And I will throw this in. There was and you already know this, I'm sure. There was a husband and wife scientists that worked in the Wuhan lab, and they were in the news for about one day, and one day only, because they said that it wasn't an accident. And I can pull up the article now. That couple has not been seen since. Now, you can decide what happened to them. But two scientists that actually work in the Wuhan lab came forward with the truth that it wasn't an accidental leak. And they are more than likely dead or in a prison cell in a basement, never to be seen again. And so the facts do show that COVID was not just a random, unfortunate incident, that there was a rhyme and reason behind it, and there was a timing reason behind it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. I'm going to pull up this information here that demonstrates that this is in 2019, and this is starting in 2018. These are emails from the Public Health Agency of Canada demonstrating that they're getting ready to send these pathogens over to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is where Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance were putting together gain of function materials out there, and they're sending this over there from Canada, because if they sent this over, they had two Chinese scientists that had connections to the People's Liberation Army, right? That would set off too many alarm bells. So what did they do? They sent them from Canada, right? This is what ends up happening. They're using different jurisdictions in order to carry out what they're doing. And this was done for the 2020 election. I'm going to pull up another set of documents here quickly before we take a break, and I'm going to go ahead and explain them. This is a timeline of events showing this coincides, and I'll bring up another timeline after the break that shows up what they were talking about at that government accountability office with what was the EcoHealth Alliance. And you look at the timelines between what was happening and being sent over from Canada. And then during that time, the Dr. Q, she was also connected to, affiliated and working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Then they took these deadly pathogens, and the BSL lab in Wuhan is only a BSL-2. What they sent over with the Henipa virus and Ebola, these were things that required a level 4 lab. This was impossible for them not to think that this was going to get out, because they didn't have the proper controls in there. And I'm going to bring this up so people can see it, the controls that they needed. And it's on this chart. So if you need to sit down and save this, do so, because this shows you right there the different things that you need. And BSL-2 is, look on that, is what they had in Wuhan. What they needed was BSL-4. They didn't have the proper engineering controls, so they knew that this was going to get out of hand and people were going to get in problems. And this book outlines it, and this was communication to the Prime Minister's office about all of this information. I'll let this cycle through so that people can see it again, but this is information that demonstrates that they knew right up to the top of the Canadian government about this, that they were warned about it, and they did nothing, knowing full well that this was going to disadvantage the United States of America. We're going to take a.
If you will, for the viewers, will you explain gain of function so they understand that, because that is key.
Yes, I'll quickly do the gain of function explanation. Gain of function is taking a regular pathogen and enhancing it so that it becomes more deadly, or it spreads faster if it's a deadly pathogen. This should never be done. They say they do it for defensive capabilities, but this is not the case. When you take something that you need extreme engineering controls because people will die, and bring it to a place where they don't have the proper controls, you are setting yourself up for failure. I'm going to take a short break here. We're going to hear from the Pillow Man, and I'll bring you up something that demonstrates that they knew what they were doing.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. You know, I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupting this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard MyPillows, only $14.98. Queens, $18.98. King size, only $1 more. Body pillows, $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bed sheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to MyPillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
So if you need any of the MyPillow products, you can go to mypillow.com/Karis or 800-845-2942. Use the promo code Karis, or you can support in the other ways over there. Just give me a minute here. I will get this information up because this is critical, because in 2014, there was a paper that they put out that demonstrated that they knew that the WHO and the, there we go. I see it right here. Make sure I got that up here. That the WHO and the CDC were well aware of lab leaks, and they did nothing about it. And so let me get this up here so people can see it. And you want to go through and make sure that you shot this so that you can see it, because this is from 2014. It shows that they were having issues with lab leaks. They knew that this was a problem, and they did nothing to stop it. They had a bunch of issues that they were knowingly coming out of China, and both the WHO and the CDC were well aware of this, and they did nothing. And this paper was written in 2014. 2014, the same year that the pardon started, right? When you begin to understand that this is what they had knowledge of. So why would you then say that you don't know and were trying to downplay the lab leak theory when you knew full well? And I'm going to pull up some emails here from Fauci, but let's get your thoughts on this, John, while I'm looking for that.
Yeah, my thoughts is Dr. Anthony Fauci is very, very well entrenched in the scientific community. He's been 35, 40 years. He knows the top people at the WHO, the World Health Organization. He knows the top people at the CDC. He knows the top health officials from around the world. And there is documentation that he didn't take action, and he knew about gain for function. And that is why he received a pardon from Joe Biden. That is very important. You know, everyone talks about including myself, we talk about Joe Biden giving pardons to his entire family because they were all part of the pay-for-play scheme. We'll talk about Liz Cheney and why she got the pardon later. But as far as Dr. Fauci, a lot of people don't even think about him, that he got a pardon from Joe Biden just like 6 to 8 weeks ago. And why? Because there's documentation that he was aware that this gain of function was happening and no one was taking action about it, but he denies it to the hilt. But there's a senator in Kentucky who many of you have heard of named Rand Paul, and he has those documents, the same documents that Dale's showing you right now, and he knows Dr. Fauci is not being honest. So obviously, like common sense, we talked about it last time I was here. You don't pardon a 35-year veteran in the scientific community unless there's a reason to. And the reason was he knew what was going on, how that they were manufacturing this pathogen to affect the world, steer the world in the direction they wanted, and he stood idly by. And that's why he got the pardon. And that's why I cannot respect Dr. Fauci.
Not a chance. And here we'll look
Not
at
a chance.
some of the stuff that he has here that you're seeing Dr. Fauci dealing with. And he's talking about the stuff respect to the COVID, and they were in communication with the WHO. And this thing you can find on the oversight. They were doing the coronavirus stuff with the EcoHealth Alliance, and it talked about Peter Daszak and all of this stuff. And knowing full well that he was in communication with the CDC, and I'm going to bring this up here, that the CDC's own documentation is the one that demonstrates that they knew that they should have never been having those Nipah viruses that were sent from Winnipeg to Wuhan there because they had no containment, and it was inevitable that there was going to be a leak. Because go back to that document there, and I want people for them to see that first one right there to make sure that you understand that when you don't look at those engineering controls, there are reasons why they're there. Because when you look at the hierarchy risk, engineering controls, once a disease is out, is the first step in a pandemic response. Now, you go to any place, look at CladeX, look at Event 201, see if you see any engineers or technologists mentioned there. I looked at all of these different pandemic preparedness, and none of them had them there. This tells you that they systematically removed the most effective infection controls deliberately so that they could go ahead and do all of these things. And they were making unconstitutional changes to the United States election and other places as well. And I'm going to bring up a little video clip for us to watch, but go ahead and make some comments there, John. I mean, I'm sure you got something to input.
No, I want to just make sure they didn't miss what you said earlier a few minutes ago. Not to mention, the lab they were using was not equipped to deal with this type of killer pathogen to begin with. So you had mentioned that a few minutes ago, and that's a very important point. It would be like doing open heart surgery in your living room. And so you said it quickly, but it's an excellent point. And I wanted to make sure that the viewers did not miss that.
Yes, and this is, I'm going to a little bit of an extended clip here. This is Pierre Poilievre. This is the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada. And listen to the words that he says about the emails that I showed you earlier, about the Chinese scientists. There was two of them, main ones, that had ties to the CCP and so forth, China, and that were sending these things back to Wuhan. And they actually had more of them, but these were the two main people. And listen to what he says about the emails.
We already knew that Justin Trudeau was not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, and the cover-up. But now we know that he cannot protect our people or our country. We just received these documents that Trudeau has been covering up for years. Documents related to a massive security breach at the Trudeau government's most sensitive laboratory where the most dangerous viruses and pathogens are studied and handled. We have learned that the Trudeau government's head of pathogens was collaborating with members of Beijing's People's Liberation Army who are responsible for bioweapons and bioterrorism. We know now that a People's Liberation Army official was able to gain personal access, walk in the door, look at computers, and have access to all of our most important virological secrets. Let me, if you think any of this is hyperbole, read the report yourself. This is from government documents, the Trudeau government's own documents. It says here on page 142, Winnipeg lab scientist Dr. Chu is head of the Special Pathogens Unit, the top person in that job. According to documents on page 242, quote, represents a serious and credible danger to the Government of Canada as a whole, and in particular at facilities considered high security due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to terrorists and foreign entities that conduct espionage to infiltrate and damage the economic security of Canada, end quote. It states further on page 239, investigators assess that Dr. Chu communicated with foreign entities during her trips to China. The evidence obtained from interviews and from information collected from the electronic content of her devices reveal that this is indeed the case. As a subject matter expert with access to sensitive information and dangerous materials, Dr. Chu presents a realistic and credible threat to Canada's economic security when conducting repeated and clandestine meetings with foreign entities, end quote. Then it says Dr. Chu conducted joint research with the Major General Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army, who, according to page 236, is a noted top virologist at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences and is China's chief biological defense expert engaged in research related to biosafety, biodefense, and bioterrorism. Bioterrorism, end quote. And these are documents, this is right out of the government's own documents. Trudeau, what did he do when he found out about this? Did he immediately inform Canadians of the breach? Did he fire anybody? No, no one was fired. Did he call an inquiry to get to the bottom of it? No, he didn't do that either. Instead, he covered it all up. He defied 4 parliamentary orders to release these documents. When the Speaker tried to get them, he sued the Speaker to cover this up. He said it was all for national security, but now we know from a committee composed of 4 members of Parliament, including 1 Liberal, and 3 judges, and I quote, the information appears to be mostly about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in policy and implementation, not legitimate national security concerns, and its release is essential to hold the government to account. In other words, there was no national security reason why we couldn't have had this before. It was only because Trudeau didn't want the embarrassment before an election. So what did he do then? He collaborated, knowing this, he collaborated with Beijing to buy a vaccine for COVID. Could you imagine if the deal that Trudeau wanted to sign with Beijing had gone ahead and we had procured China-made vaccines after learning this information? That's what was in this guy's head. And if you think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses, well, he's not responsible and how could he possibly take ownership of what happens in his government? Let me quote him. He has a document called Open and Accountable Government. And I quote, as head of government, the Prime Minister has special responsibilities for national security, end quote. It's his responsibility. This is his government's lab. It's not a random university lab. It's the top lab for the Prime Minister's public health agency. And he is exclusively responsible for the machinery of government as Prime Minister of the country. So this is on Justin Trudeau. I will add one last thing. Not only did he cover it up, not only did he try to get a vaccine from China after knowing this, he called a snap election to make sure that the voting would happen before this came out, And what happened in that election? Beijing interfered to help him win it. This is a man who says he admires China's basic communist dictatorship. We cannot trust Justin Trudeau to keep our people and its country safe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
I had
yes.
not seen that before. I had not seen that before, and that is one of the candidates running to head the country, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's the leader of the official opposition in Canada, right? He brought this out. And they mentioned foreign interference, and foreign interference is definitely tied to this. And Canada has a lot of foreign interference. So you watch Joe Biden go ahead and engage in foreign interference and flippantly, boldly talking about it. Guess who, in the documentation that I provided, that I have on the public record, it's copyrighted. It demonstrates that Hunter Biden was, and everybody knows that Hunter Biden was connected to Metabiota. What was Metabiota engaged in? They were helping to develop biological weapons. Who was Metabiota connected to? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. When Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation connected to? They're connected to the vaccine makers. Who are they also connected to? The World Health Organization, who are the largest donors. They're the largest donors outside of Germany. They donate more money in the United States. So, yes, and it's on there. So you're seeing the second largest donor, the World Health Organization, is the Bill and Melinda Gates. So you look at, they suppress the fact that COVID was spread through aerosols, right? Because they didn't want to do that, because they didn't want any proper or effective engineering controls. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention provides engineering controls that are ineffective, that don't work. They don't stop the disease, so they're spreading it. So right there, you've created an effective delivery system for those aerosol biological weapons that were handed over to China, right? And they were assembled with U.S. money, with the EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak and so forth, all done over there with the Canadians' help. Then you had over there, you had Biden and Hunter Biden and Bill Gates and all these guys all in that mess, creating the problem, effectively making sure that it spread so that they could give an even worse solution. But it's not only that. What did they do as a result of COVID? They made unconstitutional changes to the United States elections. They put in the mail-in ballots and all of these things that they had no justification for. And what ended up happening?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we talked about the timing of when COVID actually made it to the United States coastline. And it was, as we said, in the early March, where the campaigns are gearing up. Look, they knew that Donald Trump was well on his way to re-election. Inflation was a minuscule 1.4%. There was 162 million people working, the most ever working at the same time in the United States of America. Gas was anywhere from $1.88 to $2.05. What is it now? $3, $4, $5 a gallon. The grocery store, you could get eggs for $1.29 a dozen. I was at the grocery store the other day. The cheapest eggs I could find was $6.75 for a dozen eggs. So the bottom line is that they knew Donald Trump, the Democrats, they all knew Donald Trump was well on his way to being reelected. And so they needed a disruptor, and COVID was a disruptor. And they knew that they weren't going to be able to go to the polls with those pathogens infecting and killing millions of people. And actually, as painful as it is to say, their plan worked. I hate to say it, but we did mail-in ballots in 2020 because of this release. And the problem is they got a bonus, Dale, because remember, it was marketed as a one-time deal so Donald Trump wouldn't be reelected again, but it's still with us. They're getting a bonus. It's still with us right now with no legislation. We talked about that before. So This has really been a catastrophe for the United States and the millions of people that died. And politicians are willing to sacrifice lives all over the world so they can have their people in power. That is really not anything I would ever have entertained 20 years ago.
Yes, and I actually interviewed Millie Weaver. She's an investigative journalist, and she has recording of three-letter agencies in there from Zoom calls saying that they were going to use COVID to take out Trump. And they had contingency plans on how to take control of government buildings, what to do if A, B, or C happened. And then you're seeing the overt acts. And when you create with the engineering controls, why this is so bad is that engineering is an applied science. So when you see a formula, it's not theoretical. It's because there's a lot of testing to demonstrate that it replicates something that exists in the real world. So they put something out that was based on something that existed and it worked. They broke it by taking away some of the information that made it impossible for it to work and said, here, go ahead and use it. You're going to be the one to implement it under a lot of financial duress and everything else like that. And unless you had a staff of engineers or technologists, you would never get it right. And they knew people were going to get it wrong. This was designed especially with small businesses to wipe them out because they wouldn't have staff of engineers to do this or technologists. And then in some cases in hospitals, we had evidence in Saskatchewan that they weren't doing it and they had engineers. And they were the ones who issued this that they got from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that was then given to Canada. So now you have the CDC making sure that this effectively spreads. Then you have Fauci coming down and getting all of these things and making these recommendations. Then you have you have all the different agencies shutting the states down. And this is what they use to justify to get the mail-in ballots. You created a delivery system for biological weapons. That's an act preparatory to levying war. You release the biological weapon, you're levying war. That's Article 3, Section 3, and that's 46 point subsection 1 of the Criminal Code, high treason in Canada. You're finished. Over. And everything else is an overt act that continues that same treason. And this means that none of them get away. They get prosecuted. And because it started back in 2003, both in Canada and the United States, and this is in the documentation, it doesn't matter what pardons they made because the treason started long before.
And as far as the pardon for Fauci, look, Dr. Fauci, in his position when COVID started, along with the chairman of the CDC, they were the last line of defense. A Dr. Fauci that is not a dishonest Dr. Fauci would have been speaking up years ago about these experiments in this lab in Wuhan, years ago. And he knew about it. There's no way he couldn't know about it as one of the most veteran, well-known scientists in the world. We know him in the United States. He's known in the world. They love him at the WHO. They think he's God. He knew all about this, and him not stepping in and saying, you are risking a total virus to kill millions of people in this world, and I'm calling you out on it. It's got to stop now, or it's going to be called out. Whatever I can do, I will call you out. I will somehow stop it. That is what an honest Dr. Fauci would do.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, it did not happen that way. And it did go to mail-in ballots just as the end game was. But as I said, I think they were satisfied with just the fact that they knocked Trump out. But now they're even getting bonus points because it's still with us. And so insult to injury, I guess, might be the cliche right there.
We're running up on time in this segment. We're going to have to go into another segment because we need to finish off the conversation. But if you're watching on Lindell TV, you'll see it the next day because this is important. So quickly, how can people reach you? How can they help you before I close here with a prayer?
Sure. As I told you, I started about 6 months ago doing a series on X called John Goodman Comments. And just to give you a quick example, mail-in ballots, right? They burned us in 2020, but right now we don't have a single Republican media or a single Republican official speaking about mail-in ballots and how they became involved in our judicial system with no legislation. So I have an episode called The Republican Media Missing in Action. Then I did another episode about the pay-for-play scheme that Dale and I were talking about, with even more details, dates, names, more pictures. You saw one or two today. So it's been great. So you want to really see truthful content because, again, my followers know if it's not researched, if it's not factual, it's not going into anything on my timeline or into any of my episodes. The address is at John Goo. That's at JOHNGOO 77697793. One more time, Dale, and I'll conclude here. At JOHNGOO 77697793. And keep in mind, I'm a private citizen. No one knew my name 6 months ago. But again, from 2020, I took those lucky pictures of Michigan cheating, declaring Trump the winner, and then changing it back to he's not the winner in Michigan. And again, that's how I became known more so in the political arena. And so we will continue to stay on mail-in ballots. I'm in contact with Fox. I'm in contact with my state and local senators and Congress people. We've got to bring up mail-in ballots because we're liable to get clobbered and very easily could lose the House in next year's midterms. So make sure you check out my videos. And it's always a pleasure to be on this show because Dale does more than just explain. He shows the documentation to back it up. You watch a lot of shows these days. They don't show you anything. They just want you 100% just to rely on their word. And Dale and I are very similar in our philosophy that, yeah, we're going to tell you some things, but we also want to make sure we show you too. And that's the difference between this show and a lot of other shows you watch that are just 1 hour of talk and they're just saying, believe me, I'm telling you the truth, just believe me. Well, we tell you the truth, but we also give you that extra peace of mind with the documentation.
Yeah, it's like they told us to trust the science, right? But not question it, right? So this is what we really need to do. We need to start thinking and so forth. We'll pick this up on the other side because we've got more detail to go in and talk about the corruption and how this ties into Trump even more because of what they were doing. So I'll close here with
and don't forget about those. Don't forget at the end we've got those never seen before videos of Donald Trump that I took. I will give them a hint. I was in Mississippi at the time when I took them. That's all I'm going to tell you, but they're worth sticking around for.
All right. We'll close here with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. We thank you for the hope that you have given us this day and the work that John has done and other men like him and women who have done this work to help preserve the freedom for the people and help this information to get out to who it needs to get out so that we can hold these criminals to account and that we can have some peace and prosperity for the children who need this more than anyone else is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for coming, and we will see you again.
Hey everybody, Keisha here. So today I want to talk to you a little bit real quick about Tina Peters' case. So on April 9th, 2024, myself, Maureen Steele, and Ann Vandersteel all went into the state of Colorado to file a petition for redress of grievances. Tina Peters actually also signed this petition. In fact, she actually had exculpatory evidence related to the election fraud that was outlined in the petition that was not allowed to go into the court. The petition was not brought to the floor, and as a result, Tina Peters was unlawfully imprisoned. My father, Dale Richardson, was actually tortured in the state of Colorado to suppress his evidence of treason against the United States, which was based on improper engineering controls which allowed for the spread of the COVID-19 virus, which was likewise created at Wuhan by Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance with the pathogen, which were handed over to the Chinese by the Winnipeg Biolabs. This created the circumstances for widespread election fraud. My father Dale and I are friends of Tina Peters, who has been politically persecuted for standing up for the liberty of all Americans. And she, as a sister in Christ, has been persecuted like I have for standing up for the liberty of all people. In the state of Colorado, women and Christians are being persecuted on monumental levels, and I'm calling for everyone to stand up for Tina Peters in every way possible, including using the CARES Project Action Plan to compel the state government to put the petition for redress of grievance to the floor so that Tina Peters can petition before the State House that belongs to the people. And if Colorado continues to deny a Republican form of government, we will implore that Congress and President Donald J. Trump initiate Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, which guarantees a Republican form of government, to the states and use that just power to intervene and provide what the Constitution has ordained. The time is upon us to come together and stand united as people, and let the world know that we stand together to preserve this perfect union for all Americans and our posterity. That is why, y'all already know, I'm going to leave you with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who cannot be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Ciao, guys.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CARES Project podcast. We are back again for part 2 here with John Goodman, and we're going to be back talking about all of this corruption that's going on in the courts. I mean,
Oh boy.
in the government period, just governmental corruption, because we are seeing this absolutely everywhere, and something needs to be done. So you want to kind of just give a little brief introduction on what you're bringing to the table today?
Yeah, it's a combination. We're seeing both interference from the executive branch and the judicial branch. The judicial branch, we're talking about Tina Peters, the Mesa County, Arizona clerk of elections. And she felt like something wasn't right. And it's her job to make sure that Mesa County has no glitches in their voting numbers. And when she started to do some more digging, she was immediately pulled out of there and arrested immediately and denied bail with no prior record, and then ended up getting a 9-year sentence from an Obama-appointed judge. It's one of the biggest miscarriages of justice that I've ever seen. It was treated like she was a civilian that snuck in off the streets and started tampering with voting machines. But she's the clerk in Mesa County, Arizona. It's her job to make sure election integrity is the rule of the day. But Colorado, obviously, had fraud because Tina Peters doing her job. And if you are running an election fairly, you have no problem with people doing audits and doing checks. She was doing her job. And the other reason why we know that it was all a setup, politically motivated, was they tried her as a state crime, where if this was legitimate, with voting machines involved, etc., if it was legitimate, it would have been charged as a federal crime. But they didn't want Donald Trump to be able to step in and pardon her. So even though the whole thing is bogus, but if you were going to pretend it was real, it would be a federal charge. But they charged her with state, so Donald Trump could not pardon her. I do understand some sources of mine in the last few days tell me that A.G. Bondi is in contact heavily with the Attorney General in Colorado. And you saw, I think, as well as I did, her attorney on the election integrity call Thursday. I think we both saw that. So this is a blatant judicial weaponization to cover up election fraud. I wish there was a better way to put it, Dale, but our viewers don't want a word salad. That's what's going on.
Well, this is really it. Like, it was election fraud, it was treason, it was all of these things. And considering that it was a federal election that was in question, why is it that the state alone was investigating? This is where it would have potentially affected the outcome, but then they would have more transparency in a federal court than they would in a state court, right? It would have gotten more attention if they tried her in the district court, right? For crimes like this. But in the state, they could just conceal a lot of the stuff that they were doing. And that's really
and Donald Trump doesn't have, and the president doesn't have authority to pardon state charges. So they were very calculated. They knew what they were doing and how they were going to make sure that she was a victim of cancel culture, basically, which is cancel any type of checking to make sure our election is not rigged. And she's a casualty of the judicial system being weaponized, and I hope that she's out of jail very soon.
Well, this is why those petitions, like my daughter mentioned, was really bad, because in the state of Colorado was filthy. I was taken to the state of Colorado from Sweetgrass, Montana, and held there when I brought evidence of treason to the United States. And the fact that I was strapped to a bed and drugged against my will by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police when I brought this stuff that I was talking about, the engineering controls, on July 3rd of 2020. They should have shut this down. But instead, they didn't, right? And so when I went there, they're telling me I'm not coming in and all this kind of stuff. And I said, no, then I want protection under the Convention Against Torture. I want to take this to Supreme Court and U.S. authorities. And this is treason, and they didn't want that to happen, so they arrested me, took me down to Colorado, deprived me of due process. Like, oh, no, it won't happen again, so we're just going to send you back, and everything else like that, which was wrong. The judge wouldn't want to take the evidence or any of that kind of stuff. And then my daughter, later on, somebody tried to grab her with rope, duct tape, machete, and all this kind of stuff, abused pit bull, which she was later attacked by in the state of Colorado, and when they were doing this to me, they started to go after her, and they punted me out of the country. And I was very angry when I found out about what they were doing to her, because I'm like, she's telling the truth, right? And these guys are wrong. So we sent that petition in there, and with all those gross crimes, they didn't do anything. And that's why Article 4, Section 4 was mentioned, because we're watching 4 states doing the same thing, bringing the same evidence. And now you've got each people from the state, like J6ers, like in Texas and so forth. Then you have the stuff with the election fraud in Arizona, the election fraud in Colorado. You're watching the corruption in the courts in Colorado, and they just quiet. And so then this is why you want, get this information to President Trump so that he can do that, because the states are systematically denying the people a Republican form of government, and they can intervene.
And I'll tell you, this is actually a combination. We talked about it. This is actually the Tina Peters case. It's a combination of weaponizing both the judicial system and the executive branch of the government, because Donald Trump cannot pardon Tina Peters on a state charge, but you know who can, and that's the governor, Jared Polis. Could, but he won't, because if he does, then that's going to lead to uncovering of the election fraud, so he wants to keep her in wraps. Go ahead.
And all of Tina Peters' evidence, like what we saw that was Maureen Steele was handing over, like with Ann Vandersloot, my daughter was there filming it. All of that stuff that was handed over has all of Tina Peters' evidence that she was not allowed to put into court that would exonerate her. And now the obligation is on every member in the Colorado House to bring that to the floor. But it's been almost a year, and they did that so that they could put her in prison.
Yeah, and it's such a double standard, because these days they'll let someone off of a charge of assault or beating someone up because the police officer misread one word when he or she was reading the criminal the rights. But they'll go ahead and say, well, that's a loophole, you're out. But with Tina Peters, you aren't allowed to even bring your own evidence into the case, and you're still convicted. And the reason why we are talking and doing a full episode on this is, as you said earlier, Dale, it's become more and more widespread. 10 years ago, there were some cases. 20 years ago, there were less cases. There's always been some, but now it has absolutely reached the highest level of corruption in both the judicial and the executive branches than it's ever been. And at some point you finally say, what's normal for a country with 165 million people? Because there's going to be a bad apple in there. But now it's to the stage of corruption that it's not the one bad or the two bad apples. It's the whole orchard now is starting to corrupt. And that's why we, you, I, and many others are starting to really turn up the heat on this, because things like this, it's step one to a communist dictatorship type of regime. I can tell you, look at Venezuela. Venezuela, 25 years ago was an absolute beautiful democracy, beautiful country. They made millions off tourism. This was before the Maduro days. And I was a teenager, but nevertheless, we saw how the progression of how democracies can progress into a communist dictatorship type country. And we're taking the first initial steps of that right now. And that's why we're sounding the alarm bells right now, you and I and others that see what's happening to this country.
Yes, and I'm going to bring something up, because with what kind of Dominion is out of Canada, which they farm out to I believe it's Croatia, and I know also to China. This is a problem, right? Because there's a lot of inherent flaws, and Tina Peters was dealing with something like this. But then if you understand that Dominion is coming out of Canada, and you look at what, like even Poilievre was talking about, Trudeau was protecting himself and all of these things, guess what they're going to be using in the elections? Dominion. But I want to bring up this thing where they talked about, and I'll bring up this thing and I'll let people see it here. This was the Canadian Security Intelligence Service talking about foreign interference. And on this first slide that I showed there, they were talking about how the proximity to the United States made Canada a prime target for foreign interference. And so we need to really look at that, because if you've got somebody who is going to shield himself and is going to use the same Dominion voting machines, I mean, here in Canada, why would he want to allow you guys to expose that stuff? He's going to work with the entities inside the United States to make sure they're protected. And if they're, you're going after them in a jurisdiction. You're supposed to go after a corporation in their home jurisdiction, right? And I mean, this is bad. This is very bad.
You know, and you know, we talked about it in the first segment, but even if we solve voting machine issues, and even if we go to 1 day voting paper ballots, which I'm for all of that, but if we still have the problem with millions of fraudulent mail-in ballots, we are still not going to get to where we need to be. And I made this point in front of 7 million people on Thursday on the National Election Integrity Call. So I'm not downing the work other people are doing, because, you know, we have people that are IT experts that are trying to get voting machine issues brought to the attention of administrators. We have people that deal with the Department of Elections we have people that deal with the legislators trying to get sponsors for bills, you know. But my point being that I'm the hawk of mail-in ballots, because despite voting machines, despite paper ballots, despite 1 day voting, despite it all, if we still don't have a handle on mail-in ballots, and more states continue to do vote by mail only, then the other things, although important, are still not going to be able to override the cheat.
This is the whole issue. That's a control failure. You cannot effectively have any control when you let such a porous thing, because you can fix everything else, and then they're like, oh well, we got all these mail-in ballots. Like we saw that. Like, I mean, in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania and all these other places where we saw in the 2020 election, they were talking about, oh, all these mail-in ballots. Oh, guess what? We got another batch, and we got another batch, and then we keep seeing these elections taking days, and I'm like, well, you're supposed to have machines, and it's taking longer than the hand counting. Come on.
So I want to fix what's ultimately the thing that's going to bring us down. You know, it's like the person that says, hey, I fixed my car. It's got new brakes. It's got new tires. It's got new everything. The only thing that doesn't work is the engine. That's what this reminds me of. Fixing things that do need to be fixed. But mail-in ballots is the engine, in my analogy.
Yes, and you need to fix all of it. Like, we can't leave anything out. Yes, mail-in ballots, it's astronomical. If you fix everything else and leave the mail-in ballots, it
won't get the job done.
Exactly.
It just won't.
You'll just see all of these extra truckloads of mail-in ballots coming in to you know what I mean? They could keep printing them like crazy, and they will.
And everyone watching the CARES Project right now should be saying to themselves, well, it doesn't matter if you're watching and you're a millionaire, whether you're a construction worker, a nurse, a front desk agent at a Super 8, it doesn't matter. Everyone should be asking the question, how did mail-in ballots become part of our voting system when there wasn't any laws passed or any voting? And I word it simple because not everyone that watches us has the knowledge that we have in politics. They have knowledge. They probably have more knowledge than me in everything else, but maybe not in politics. So that's why I want to keep my answers very simple. But the bottom line is, yes, it's totally true. Mail-in ballots, despite everything else we do, if we don't fix mail-in ballots, we're in trouble on elections moving forward. But again, the part that is just so surprising, and I will say it until the last nail goes in the coffin, there's been no laws making mail-in ballot a part of the fabric of our voting system. There just has been nothing, zero. It just seeped in and stayed in. And it couldn't be more destructive to a free and fair election.
Of course. And I'm going to play something here because we're talking about the just blatant cheating and
Yeah, it is.
and Dominion Motor Machines. It's in Canada, and I want people to see how blatant this is. This is where they had Maxime Bernier talking about him going for the conservative leadership when he was still a party member of the conservative leadership, and how he lost, right? And this is where he said where they had 240,000 ballots people, but 250,000 people cast votes, and he lost 49 to 51. And we'll just listen to him describe this, and this is where that's controlling your voting systems, like America.
Let me see that.
Yeah,
Let me see. I haven't seen.
Didn't like my position about abolishing corporate subsidies, the cartel in milk, poultry, and eggs, and a lot of my policies. So I was not the candidate of the establishment. So what they did the night of the election, and you can see the video about that. They said, we have a winner. The winner is Andrew Scheer, 51%, Bernier, 49%, and we destroyed the ballots. So just, a couple of hours after the vote, they destroyed the ballot. And the day after, in the Global Mail, the big newspaper in Canada, they were saying that at that time we were about 240,000 members. And the Global Mail was saying, they had 250,000 votes. So, and they said that, 250,000 people voted, but we had 240,000 members. So they had to create 10,000 votes to be sure that, I won't win. And they did it. They cheated.
Because it's a straight majority. It's 50+% and there was only you and Andrew Scheer at the time.
Yeah, because, in the beginning they had 12 candidates, but, at the end, that was only me and Andrew Scheer. Yes.
And it was 51-49, and they purportedly destroyed the ballots before there could be. Are there no internal procedures
before they can be challenged? Because after that, when I've read that piece from the Global Mail, we did a research and that was true. So I said to the Conservative Party, I want a recount. And they said, oh, we destroyed the ballots. So that's why I said when I resigned after that, this party is morally and intellectually corrupt. They did cheat at my leadership contest in 2017, and also they don't want to speak about real conservative values when real conservative values are not popular.
Wow. That makes your head spin right there.
Yes. Wow. And this is flippantly happening, and they did this to him years ago because he wanted to bring these in years ago when they were doing the leadership race, and Andrew Scheer he saw this and said, we want to put the brakes on it. They were like, no, we're not doing that. So they cheated flippantly, and then he was just like, I'm out. And then he started his own party. And now they won't give him any media time because they don't want people to hear what he has to say, because people are seeing the illegal immigration going through the roof, and people are going to go vote for Poilievre, who is still towing that same line, because if he wasn't, they would have never let him get the leadership.
And as you often say, Dale, when we talk about common sense, again, our viewers, I'm sure they would totally agree. Common sense tells you that if everything's on the up and up, you don't need to destroy the votes. You preserve the votes in case.
Exactly.
Because 51-49, that would be a close enough election that I know in the United States that would, in many states, that would generate an audit or a recount. And in a close election like that, even if it wasn't close. But the bottom line is, common sense tells you that if everything's fine, there's no need for you to destroy records. And we can draw that same conclusion with Tina Peters. If everything's fine in Colorado, then the clerk who has a right to check on the election and make sure it's running properly, there should be no problem with that either. So the fact that Tina Peters is thrown in jail for making sure elections in Colorado are running clean, and the fact that the candidate in Canada lost by a whisker, and then the votes of that election were quickly destroyed. Both those cases show that there's wrongdoing, or you wouldn't take those actions.
Well, especially with Maxime Bernier, there were only 240,000 members in the Conservative Party to vote, but they had 250,000 votes. So there was 10,000 more votes than there were party members.
Right. That would be like a county. That would be like a county in the United States that has 50,000 registered voters, but 67,000 votes come in from that county.
Exactly that. That's exactly that. Not possible. Okay. So when you're looking at these, when people are destroying records, they're only doing it for one reason, right? This is common sense. If you won fair,
because there is an irregularity or a cheat or a fraud or a fix, because otherwise you say, yeah, let's audit and double check. We want to make sure everything's right. This is the world I come from. Yeah, let's do an audit just to be sure. It was a close election. Let's do an audit, be sure it can't hurt anything. That's the world you and I come from, and I think most of your viewers come from. The refusal to do audits, the refusal to let Tina Peters bring in evidence, all of that is simply a cover-up of the fraud.
Yes, and this is what we're seeing, and this is why foreign interference and this government corruption, they go hand in hand, because you're getting a lot of the influence. And I'm just going to play a short clip here, and then we'll discuss it and take a commercial break. But this is talking about some of the foreign interference that they're having here, and a lot of this interference that they said is coming from China. And then when you're looking at the Dominion voting machines that are here and they're farmed out to Croatia and China and all the other things that are being done, you have to sit down and watch, like Biden was taking money from China and all of that kind of stuff. Like they called him the Manchurian candidate and all this stuff. We need to start paying attention to this.
Canada's Foreign Interference Commission has wrapped up a week of hearings that heard new evidence about attempts by foreign powers to interfere in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections. That evidence focused mostly on China and its apparent efforts to tilt the 2021 election towards the Liberal Party. The Prime Minister, however, has been reluctant to answer questions about this new information. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, has been following the proceedings all week. David.
Well, Carolyn, we've heard evidence all week about activity during the 2021 election that CSIS believes may have been coordinated by China to defeat Conservatives and help the Liberals.
Comments by individual PRC officials.
A declassified summary of CSIS intelligence was entered into evidence late Thursday, in which CSIS reported that in 2021, some individual People's Republic of China officials in Canada made comments expressing a preference for a Liberal Party minority government.
As soon as they heard my Chinese name.
2 days ago, a 2021 Conservative candidate, Kenny Chiu, testified. Chiu lost his re-election bid after a barrage of disinformation was aimed at him. Disinformation that security officials believe may have been coordinated by China.
Just to clarify.
And the inquiry has also taken note of some CSIS intelligence summaries that China may have been behind efforts to assist some Liberal candidates in the Toronto area. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has resisted all week commenting on evidence as it emerged at the inquiry, and he did so again on Friday.
I look forward to taking all sorts of questions at the Commission next week.
And while the inquiry has spent most of the week hearing about China, it has also heard evidence that other countries have also tried to interfere in Canadian political processes, notably Pakistan, Russia, Iran, and, second only to China, India.
I think it's fair to say that, the behavior of India has been of concern in the last couple of elections.
No evidence has been presented to suggest India or the others favored one party or another in Canadian elections, but CSIS believes all of those countries engaged in covert and clandestine activity to promote their own interests.
We've known for many, many years that many different countries take an interest in engaging in Canadian institutions.
The clear message from political party officials and politicians who have already testified at this inquiry is that to better protect themselves, they need more information in real time during election campaigns. And we'll see next week if the Prime Minister agrees. Carolyn.
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thanks.
I mean, they just, yeah,
I didn't realize Canada had the election problems that we have. I've learned a lot. I focus on what's going on in the United States a lot more. Trudeau, hiding things. Now, he said he'd answer questions next week at the hearing. Has that hearing occurred yet?
Oh yeah, they did. This was from a little while ago. This was last year. He didn't answer the questions. He
didn't.
Right, and this is where I wanted to pull this up up here, and I'm going to just discuss it a little bit, because this is where they were talking about. This is some of that the foreign interference committee, and they were actually talking about the 2019 EU election, the 2020 election, and so forth. And they talked about how social media could be used to influence elections, like talking about getting likes and all these different things, which the disinformation was used to take out that conservative Chinese candidate who wasn't pulling for Beijing. And so when you start looking at those things, and that Canada identified that that China would potentially be looking for, using a biological weapon to further their interests, this becomes problematic. Well, let's finish discussion on the other side. We got to hear from Mike Lindell for the Pillars. All right.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets.
I'm interrupted this commercial to do something I've never done before. Get 2 MyPillows absolutely free on orders of $100 or more. I can't do this forever, so get on board with this great sale today. Our best-selling 6-piece bath towel sets or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Our famous standard MyPillows, only $14.98. Queens, $18.98. King size, only $1 more. Body pillows, $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color. So go to MyPillow.com or call that number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And when you spend $100 or more, get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Yeah, so if you need any of the MyPillow stuff, you can go to mypillow.com/Karis or call 800-845-2942 and use the promo code Karis. And there's some stuff on the ticker if you want to, obviously, the MyPillow or support in other ways. And, kind of circling back to this is where you're looking at the foreign interference in 2019. 2019 was critical for that to happen so that Trudeau could do what he did, right? And then he protected it. And that, because that's where they transferred the bioweapons to Wuhan, where Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance were there. That was instrumental in being able to circumvent the constitutional processes by putting people in a state of fear so that they could add in all of those mail-in ballots without going to any constitutional processes. And then they just kind of left them alone. They used COVID as the vehicle, and it would not be possible. So they needed Justin Trudeau to be there to protect himself, protect the foreign interference and all of those things, so that they could carry out with impunity all of the stuff that they helped support on the other side of the border, because they helped support putting together the biological weapons that were eventually then used in the United States so that they could go ahead and do this unprecedented fraud. This is absolute disgusting, treasonous activity, and it's operating through multiple countries.
And it's obvious. It's obvious. Don't be fooled, folks. COVID was not an accident. if it was an accident, number one, it would have been contained immediately. Instead, it made it to 45 countries. Now, how does it go across oceans and through mountains and from one side of the world to the other, unless it is meant to be distributed like that? And the fact that Dale showed us earlier, this lab was not even authorized or equipped to deal with pathogens of this severity and deadly strength. And Dale showed us that the United States was aware that this was going on, including Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Fauci never said boo. And there are people out there that think that he didn't say boo because he was on the take for a payoff to keep his mouth shut, which could be the case because, remember, Dr. Fauci got a pardon from Joe Biden. So you say to yourself, I'd love to ask Joe Biden, what was the pardon for Dr. Fauci? Because the pardon wasn't because he disagreed with Donald Trump on data. That's not like a jail crime. So what was the actual reason? What was the crime that Dr. Fauci committed that you pardoned him? Or was this just another pre-pardon because you knew that between 2014 and present that he had known about COVID and did not live up to his responsibilities? So it makes total sense. And then we talked about the timing of COVID. Starts in March of 2020, right when the candidates are getting ready to go out and turn the campaign up full time. And by the way, Donald Trump in 2020 did a microcosm of the rallies he did in 2016. And of course, that was what they wanted to happen, the Democrats. They knew with COVID, he wasn't going to be able to do rallies like he was in 2016. COVID was about elections and who was in power. It was like that in Canada. It was like that here in the United States. There's no accident to it, or else it would not have gone to 45 countries, and it would not have been played around with in a lab that wasn't equipped for deadly pathogens. That's pretty much the take that I have on it, Dale. I know you want to probably add some more there.
Of course it was, because one of the pathogens, the Bangladesh strain of the Hanipa virus that was found in the spike protein, was delivered by Chu, the Chinese agent, to Wuhan in 2019. That is 100% damning, and this was reported by the Canadian media. I might not have it today, but I will play it again in a future clip. I'll put it in a thread on my X, but this is public knowledge of that was there, and it was found in the episode that I showed, in the last episode. I showed the document that showed that same strain that came from Winnipeg was put in there. That is collusion. And then I'm going to bring one other clip up here so that we can sit down and see this, knowing full well that they knew what was going on. So this is Sam Cooper. He's a Canadian reporter who's also done stuff about the Winnipeg biolabs.
We don't have any information that anything from Winnipeg, including biological materials, was sent to work on bat coronaviruses. What we do know is that Dr. Chu was secretly enlisted through something called China's, People's Liberation Army 1,000 Talents Plan to be the international lead researcher on a bat coronavirus gain of function research project with, as I found from redactions that I pieced together, the Batwoman, Dr. Shi, and another person who Dr. Q introduced into the Winnipeg lab, who, without adding on too many pieces of information here, this third person, very important person, a Wuhan senior technician, is caught trying to walk 10 vials from Dr. Chu's lab room in Winnipeg out of the Winnipeg lab in October 2018.
I don't think you're supposed to be doing that.
No.
She tells me you're not supposed to be doing that.
And then they sent the Nipah virus and all those other pathogens to Wuhan after this, after they got caught trying to walk this out. And this is like in the timeline, some of the stuff that I showed in the last episode. And this was an older thing, and they didn't realize at this time that this was actually found in the spike proteins, because now we have evidence that what that was sent there is now in the spike proteins. We know that they were creating gain of function. They got that from Winnipeg, and the person who was researching how to do this was Dr. Chu. And then she was back there, and lo and behold, now they have that put in together, right? That's
and I'll tell you what really, if our viewers are looking at this closely, they probably have figured out by now the COVID release, which means in my book that the people that released it were more concerned with who was in power than they were if millions of people died. And I know that's a downer to say that, but they knew the pathogens they were dealing with when they were released. They knew they were lethal. They knew, and the fact that you would knowingly release that, knowing it's going to kill people just so you can have the people in power that you want in power. That's what it comes down to. I even took a note here. It says, power more important than people's lives. I wrote it down because that's really sick. And I believe Dr. Fauci should be in jail. And I think he would be, because I think Rand Paul with a Republican administration would be able to prove gain of function. But you know what? He was getting blocked every step of the way by the Biden administration, and the CDC would not cooperate with him. The WHO hesitated to talk to him. They knew he was on to something. And I said on the commercial, I don't think our viewers heard it, but you and Rand Paul would be able to have a long, intelligent, professional, factual conversation on this whole scenario. The motivation, the way it was conducted, the way it was released, the investigations that show there's a problem, but there always seems to be somebody that covers it up, locks it away, or you get someone in power that won't deal with it. One way or the other, they continue to run from it. But there's enough out there now that I think majority of the people know that this was a power grab at the expense of millions of lives.
Oh yes, and this is where we now come back in there. And treason is where when you start seeing these overt acts, this is where you have what you need to investigate. We have people that have brought up elements of talking about conspiracy using COVID to take out Trump. We have the overt acts. We have the conspiracy. We have, the creation of the delivery system. You have the mens rea, actus rea. Now you look at the judiciary. Once you've now made all of these changes, because COVID's main function was to take out the government, install this insane vaccination program, put the trafficking through the roof, destroy the population, and the judiciary was tasked now to make sure that people couldn't restrain the government. And
absolutely right. Absolutely right. I was gonna say, number one, I've learned a lot on this show. I may be the guest on this show. I've learned a lot on this show today. Some of it, a lot of it I knew, but there were certain things that I did not know until I saw those memos. And those memos, by the way, are official government memos that Dale's been showing. This wasn't typed up on somebody's Word app on their laptop in suburbia, USA. What Carney was holding in his hand were documents that Trudeau purposely hid from the public for years because it showed China's interaction on this with, or showed Canada's interaction on this with China. And Trudeau even went to court to prevent it from becoming public. Again, like we talked about before, another example of common sense. Why do you go to court to hide documents from the Canadian citizens unless there's something illegal, something irregular, something treasonous, something you don't want the public to know? It's the same narrator as the Tina Peters. Throw her in jail rather than the truth come out of the election fraud. You know, it's the same. It's exactly the same kind of deal. And now we're going to get into a little bit about the judicial branch of the weaponization, which is where I really feel very comfortable dealing with that, since that is one of the things I work with every day with the election integrity team. And I just want to point out a couple examples. Is that all right, Dale?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about with the release of the COVID and the cover up.
No, we're running on. We don't have a lot of time left, so let's get to the judicial.
And we want to say time for our fun, rare videos that we promised them.
Yes.
Okay. So let me go through just a list. And again, this isn't an opinion list. This is a factual list of the judicial system being weaponized. And you know, we've talked about that. This is one of the areas I focus on every day. First of all, the Trump trials, okay? The New York City trial, okay? There's a few things that you don't know. Number one, the judge was not supposed to be on that case because he violated Section 14 of the Judicial Code in New York, which talks about bias. Did you know that the judge, Juan Merchan, wrote a 2019 op-ed ripping Donald Trump very hard? So how can a judge that rips Donald Trump turn around and be the presiding judge on a Donald Trump case? It violated the bias law of New York State, but he was on the case anyway. Then he was ineligible for the case a second time. He violated New York Judicial Statute 100.5, which is called inappropriate political activity. And in this case, with Judge Merchan, it is that he donated money to several Democrat organizations, plus the Biden and the Clinton campaigns. So you can't be a judge donating to Democrats, but then presiding over a Republican's case in your courtroom. So he violated that. Then something I didn't even mention to you, Dale. New York has a system called the random draw. And the reason the random draw is in place, it's so judges don't end up on cases that they're not supposed to. It's supposed to avoid situations like what happened here with Donald Trump. But you know what? There was no rotation system here. And you know how? Get ready for this one. The same judge, Juan Merchan, that was on presiding over the Donald Trump case was the same judge that was on the Trump Organization case with Eric Trump and Donald Jr. The same judge. I know you didn't know that. And most of the people out there watching don't. Now, if New York has a rotation, yes. Look it up right now. I'll stay on extra. So if New York has a random draw rotation system on judges, why was the same judge, how was the same judge on both Donald Trump's case and the case that Letitia James took on the Trump Organization? It was both times Judge Juan Merchan. And why was it Juan Merchan? I'll sum it up. Why was it the same judge on both cases? I'm going to talk layman's terms. Yeah.
I mean, this is corruption. If they're wanting an unfavorable reaction, they put a judge that doesn't like him, and he's publicly don't like him. They went against him once. You're going to do it again.
Exactly. The bottom line is New York put on a judge that they purposely knew hated Donald Trump and would do everything in his power for a slanted trial to make sure Trump was incarcerated before the election so he couldn't win the presidency. That was the end game right there. The other laws he violated, the most severe of them all, The one-sided gag order, unconstitutional. A gag order is either the trial's gagged and no one can talk about it on either side except in the courtroom, or it's not gagged. And when it's not gagged, that's when you often see attorneys and people out there talking to the reporters, trying to win the vote of popular opinion type thing.
Yes.
But this trial, it was a one-sided gag order. While Donald Trump was not allowed to say one word about the case, convicted felon Michael Cohen and that porn lady Stormy Daniels were on every talk show in the United States talking it up against Donald Trump, while Donald Trump could not say one word. And to make it even worse, Michael Cohen, the convicted felon, who was one of their star witnesses, but okay, he was on TikTok. And he got this company that hates Donald Trump to donate 60,000 orange T-shirts. And what Michael Cohen did was he put a picture of Donald Trump on those orange T-shirts and was selling them on TikTok, trying to make them look like jail jumpsuits. And he made, they said, about $35,000, $37,000. And this was going on during the trial. Come on now. And it's beyond belief. It is. But then here's the main point. Who's the one person that could have put a stop to it as it happened? The governor, Kathy Hochul. In the United States, the governor of each state has judicial oversight. She knew the judge was violating the bias law. She knew the judge was violating by donating to the Democrats. She knew the one-sided gag order was unconstitutional. But did she step in and did she stop it? No. And why didn't she stop it? Because she felt the same way as the judge and the other Democrats. She wanted Donald Trump locked up too. Don't you see?
It doesn't matter because the Constitution doesn't permit this. And she has an obligation to follow the Constitution. But when you're watching, well, exactly, that's what this is why this is continuing. Because
it says in her oath, quote, uphold the laws of New York State. Well, when the judge was breaking the law, she didn't uphold them. She sat on her hands because she wanted Trump locked up too. So, she could technically be charged with complicity because she was supposed to step in and say, I'm sorry, Juan, we got to get a different judge here.
Of course she is, because of her the obligation of what she's doing. They're punishing Trump to make sure to show them that if you step out of the line, this is what's going to happen to you. Just like the J6ers, anybody else who oppose them, this is what they do when they run color revolutions. The enemies, they just make examples of them. It's like you shoot one and everybody else backs away. That's exactly what they're doing.
So let me blow you away just a little bit more. I'm telling you, everything is researched and factual, and that's why things are going very well on X, because the trust and credibility. Now, after I just named the statutes, and you can go to nycourts.gov. I read 9 hours of the Trump's New York City trial transcript. I'll tell you, it reads like a trial in Moscow. It's alarming. But anyone can go there and read it. You can go there and read it. And you could by reading it in the second week of the trials, when you could start to feel the frustration of the Trump legal team, because that's when it hit them that this was fixed. The first week, not so much. The second week, you could really see it. And they questioned Judge Merchan on a motion ruling he made, said it was not following the law. And Judge Merchan did not use the F word, but he used a lot of other profanity and had a meltdown at Todd Blanche, one of Trump's attorneys. So here's the deal. A.G. Bondi could get the judge and Kathy Hochul for this. Donald Trump could pardon himself, but he hasn't. He could pardon himself, but he hasn't. But here's where I want to blow everyone away. You hear about the New York City trial being rigged, and we've given you the statutes that he violated, and it was. I mean, one-sided gag orders. I mean, what else could even someone that doesn't know politics think? They would know it was fixed. But here is the coup de grace, the main course. After all of this, Donald Trump goes to sentencing 10 days before the election. 10 days before the election, he goes to sentencing. And let me tell you the sentencing that Donald Trump got. Remember, he was convicted in New York City trial. Here is the sentence Donald Trump got. 0 jail time, 0 probation, 0 community service work, 0 fine. In other words, the judge sentenced Donald Trump in the New York City trial to absolutely nothing, but he let the conviction stand. You see, if he was so guilty and these charges were so severe, then why did he get no punishment? Why?
Because
it's a fair question. Yeah, because you know why he got no punishment? Because it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work. I mean, it worked that they weaponized it. We got to stop that. But he didn't go to jail.
Yes.
And so the judge has compromised himself, and so has the governor. So I wanted everyone to know that was important to know. No one talks about that. He received punishment of nothing.
Yes.
Nothing.
That demonstrates that there was no guilt.
That's right.
We're running up here on time, so let's get to the clip.
All right. Yeah, let me lay this out for him real quick. Sure. And I'll make it quick. I know we are running late on time. So we told you at the start of the show, I've been holding on to some footage I took of Donald Trump that you're going to be the audience that gets the ability to see it right off the bat. The first thing you're going to see is I attended one Donald Trump rally, only one have I been to, and it was when he was still a candidate, had not been even elected to his first term yet. This was August 28th, 2016 in Jackson, Mississippi. This is me taking Donald Trump video as he comes onto stage for a rally in Jackson, Mississippi, 2016, before he first won.
Okay, let's get to that.
So you probably noticed I was like 8 feet from President Trump, and I have, how did I get that close? Because I was visiting my cousin, who's even a bigger supporter of Donald Trump than I, and he insisted that we go 6 hours early. And when we got there 6 hours early, there was already 100 people there. And it rained a few times, and it was 90 degrees, and it was, but as I look back at the location of where we were right there, I guess I'm going to view it as worth it. I don't think anyone's getting that close anymore, especially since Butler. But that is a pretty cool video. You notice the difference is that now when he comes out, it's the full song of God Bless the USA, and there aren't people already on stage waiting to greet him most of the time. So since he got elected, he's changed his way he comes on for rallies. The last part about that, the day I filmed that rally, I didn't film the rally, I just filmed his entrance. But the day I filmed his entrance, August 28th, 2016, that exact day, he was trailing by 4 points in the polls to Hillary Clinton 6.5 weeks before the election of 2016. Now, the final two things that I've got to show you. Number one, I've never shared them with anyone. Actually, three, because I want the Oval Office picture also. one thing that really bothers me, you can disagree with Donald Trump on policies. You can say he's too brash. You can say he's this. You can say he's that. But the reason why I get a little bit ticky when people call him a racist, actually, I get more ticky when they call him a racist than when they do call him a threat to democracy, because everybody knows the other side, the Democrats, have been the threat to democracy. So I'm not even going to defend that. But the racist part bothers me because Donald Trump has done lots of things to help minorities that other presidents didn't do. Number one, when he was off in his first term, there were more African Americans working with decent paying jobs than in the history of the country. Same with Hispanic, Latino, and Asian Americans. So that's number one. Number two, do you have that picture of the in the Oval Office that you can flash up?
Yeah, it's ready.
Flash
I'm gonna bring it up here.
Flash that up, and then.
Sorry, this is the picture. Sorry, that he was working with. I guess he got a little happy on the trigger finger, but that's Donald Trump in the Oval Office with a bunch of black people, right?
Yeah. And what that is those are the leaders of the historic black colleges and universities. HBCU is what they call it, historic black colleges and universities. And those are colleges like Bethune-Cookman and Howard University and some of the smaller schools that have trouble, staying afloat financially. Well, up to Donald Trump's days, number one, these are predominantly black students, black professors. These are mostly schools that have black students. And before Donald Trump ever got to Washington, this group that heads the historic black colleges and universities would have to come to the president every year, basically begging for money. And they got some money, they scraped by. Well, that picture right there is in 2017. And Donald Trump has just been elected to his first term, and they come to see him. But he said, I'm not going to do it like the other presidents. I think the historic black colleges and universities need the funding, need the backing, are an important part of the history of this country. And what Donald Trump did was he gave them double what any other president had given them. And he gave them the money for the 4 years up front in advance, so they wouldn't have to come back to Washington every year, feeling uncomfortable asking for more money. He wanted to take them off the hook of having to do that. He doubled the money and gave them 4 years worth of it up front. So that's not a racist move in my part. And then we're going to show you one video that has never been seen before. I've had it on my phone for a long time, and then I will explain. You're going to see a Trump motorcade, and I will explain about that after it.
Okay.
Okay, so we showed you previously him entering the rally in Jackson, Mississippi, 2016. This video I took is also near Jackson, Mississippi. I have relatives there. This is December the 9th, 2017, a year later. And the reason why that motorcade is important is because why was he in Jackson, Mississippi in 2017 in December? Well, that motorcade was coming back to the airport from the newly dedicated Mississippi Civil Rights Museum that Donald Trump went in person to make sure that he could give credence and Martin Luther King's memory and show a stand against slavery, against racism, against all of it. And so he went back to Jackson, Mississippi in December of 2017 to dedicate the Civil Rights Museum. And that video I took was him coming back on Interstate 55 after the dedication, between the museum, coming back to the airport. And I also snapped a still shot of the Beast, the president's, the car that almost, they say, I think it has guns sticking out the side like the Batmobile or something. But you have that picture.
I'll bring it up right now here.
Okay.
We'll let people see it now. So this is the car. This is the snapshot he's talking about. So I'll let people see that, and then you can explain it.
Yeah, that car, that body is like 4 or 5 bulletproof everything, and they won't confirm it, but there are rumors that coming out where your running lights are in the front, that some guns can be remotely activated and come out of there, and that car has some weapons on it. In other words, it's a car, but it's like a tank that looks like a car almost equipped. So just wanted to show you those videos. But the bottom line is this: his actions, whether it be dedicating a civil rights museum or whether it be making sure that our historic Black colleges and universities are operating and continue to operate, those are not actions of a president that deserves to be called a racist. And he's had plenty of minorities in his cabinet too, both this time and the first time. So that's sort of unrelated, but it's something I wanted to share with you. And at the same time I was sharing it, I said, and they'll also get to see some videos that nobody's seen.
Yes. And I mean, this is kind of where we're at. We have to look at more so what's going on. A lot of people can sit down. I don't care whether you like Donald Trump or not. It's not the issue. When you look at what's being done, this is a whole lot of crime being done. And that crime, whether you agree with him or not, that can't continue. You just cannot do that and allow that to happen in the judiciary. So you can't allow that kind of corruption. It's like, that's really the bottom line. People sit down and say, I don't care what you think or not think. That kind of corruption, it cannot exist. I'm like, yeah, he won the election the last time. Whether I like him or not is inconsequential. It's what was done. Was it right or was it wrong? It was wrong. It was treason. I don't care who the guy was. If he won, he won. You don't have to like him. He won, right? When you allow somebody to commit crime, you can't allow somebody to destroy your country because you don't like someone. It's just
exactly right, Bill. Exactly right. I've had candidates that I have supported that lost, but the election was run properly. So there's nothing else to say about that in that kind of situation, except we tried and we did the best we could. So that part of it's not an issue. The part that Dale and I are often talking about is the fixing and the rigging, because I don't expect that every time I like a candidate, they're going to win. I'm sure every one of us have liked a candidate that didn't win, but we can accept losing if it's fair and not rigged. Most Americans can accept that.
The process has to be correct, because you win some, you lose some. You can't win all the time. But if the process is rigged, that's the problem, because this is what we're seeing, is that everything is rigged. And if everything is rigged, then you can't have any fairness. And that's really where it is. And so,
and I think like you said, in the last, I know we're short on time, so I will just say quickly, the executive weaponization, we're going to talk about, or we'll just quickly mention, remember the documents, and they raided Mar-a-Lago, right? They raided Mar-a-Lago in the middle of the night with pistols and guns. But on the other side of the coin, Joe Biden has classified documents in his garage, and that's fine. So it is a double standard. That's why you heard me say at the beginning, it's not right or wrong anymore. It's what your last name is. But it also, it doesn't ring true that you go after Donald Trump saying he has documents he shouldn't have, but Joe Biden has them actually in a garage. And as we talked, Dale, Joe Biden was vice president at the time he took those documents, which there's a much stricter guideline on what you can take as vice president versus president. So, and of course, there's a video where Hunter Biden, because they have that Corvette, they're always bragging about that darn Corvette. There's videos out there that are not photoshopped from a neighbor, a friend of Hunter Biden that took a video of him backing the Corvette out, and you can see the documents in waterlogged cardboard boxes in the corner. No security, no nothing. To me, between that and that he shouldn't even have had them because he was vice president, is worse than a president who has more latitude and has them behind gates and locked doors and that kind of thing. But yet Trump was wrong and Joe Biden was somehow okay for having this. So, yeah, it is. The world's upside down right now, but we're going to do our part. We're not letting off the gas pedal, Dale. We're going to do our part until Canada and the United States are back on track again.
Oh, yes. So how can people reach you before we close here?
Thank you. Yeah, I've run a nice series called John Goodman Comments, and it is a once a week series on X. Several of my videos over 100,000 views. I don't say that in a brag way because my followers, people like you, my followers are the ones that have given me the platform to be able to get our message out, not my message, our message. So I want to thank my followers who repost and talk it up and constantly. They're great. So they can reach me at JOHN GOO. That's at John Goo 7769 7793. One more time, Dale. At JOHN GOO 7769 7793. And at the top of my profile page, I do something very different. My personal email, I have it on there. Most people don't do that. But I hear from my followers and not followers. I hear from people on my email. I don't just post my episodes and then go out to the patio and lie in the sun. I actually communicate with my followers and through DM and through email. And that's how I've built up the following because they know that they're not going to hear BS from me. I'm not going to go on and film an episode with BS because it's not worth my time to do it. And it's not worth anyone else's time to watch it. So come to my X page and join me. You will see some factual, real, vetted content that is not what you would normally see on most people's X pages. I really appreciate you having me back on the show, Dale. It's been cool. A lot of fun.
All right. Yes, it has been. And so I'll close
it. Has been.
Well, close it with a prayer, and I'm sure we'll be back again to talk about some more stuff because, there's a lot to unpack. So I'll close with prayer here. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. And Father, this day I ask of you to watch over Tina Peters in her situation and help her that she would get out of prison and that people will come in and support the work that she's doing and watch over President Trump as he goes to do the work with the people and help the people to support him to do what needs to be done so that people can be protected. The countries can be preserved. And Lord, I ask of you this day to watch over all the men and women in Canada, United States, around the world that are standing up to preserve liberty, but especially here in this part of the world so that we could have some peace and safety for the children is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
And thank you guys all for coming, and we'll see you again next week or tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Okay.